Out beyond the outer rim of the Talari cluster, their long-range scanners caught a distortion, a blur against the emptiness. No heat signature, no power readings, just a ripple, like space itself had been bent and pinned by something old, something wrong. High Chancellor Vekris of the Juthari Dominion dismissed it. A glitch, perhaps, static from the neutron storms. After all, no one had breached the Dominion's outer wall in over 2 centuries. They'd built it to last, an arc of defense platforms the size of moons, equipped with planet-killer beams and self-repairing armor. The galaxy had learned that you don't challenge the Juthari. But that ripple didn't go away. It moved, slowly, then faster. Each time it blinked past another sensor relay, the system went dark. Not just the feed, everything. As if the station had been crushed into silence. They sent scout drones. None returned. Then the ripple stopped, positioned directly in front of Sector Gate 7. The heart of the wall. An impenetrable fortress. Triple-layered shields, gravity disruptors, antimatter flak cannons. It was a masterpiece of war engineering. So when the distortion finally unfolded, when the light bent backward and the mass took form, it wasn't fear they felt. It was confusion. Because what emerged wasn't sleek, it wasn't alien, it wasn't one of theirs. It was massive, brutal, angular, black, built like a hammer, not a blade. Scarred, scorched, and crawling with strange armor plating that looked fused, as if salvaged from battles it had already won. And along its side, in dull, faded letters, scorched but still readable, HSS Revenant. Human. That word hadn't been spoken in centuries, not since the cleansing, not since the Dominion wiped out Earth. On the bridge of the wall's central command, Vekris stared in silence. His generals barked orders, scanning for signals, life signs, heat, movement, anything. There was nothing. No message, no demands, no threats, just a dead silence that suffocated. Then the ship moved. No flare, no power surge, just motion, smooth, inevitable. The Dominion reacted fast. Fighters launched, cannons spun, shields activated. The first salvo fired, streams of antimatter and ion pulses that should have vaporized anything not buried in a neutron shell. But the blasts stopped. Mid-air, mid-space, frozen. No explosion, no contact, just gone. The next second, the wall's forward station, Station 9 Alpha, split in half. Not exploded, not torn apart, just cut, like a blade had passed through it. No heat, no sound. 12,000 soldiers, gone in silence. Panic hit next. The Juthari weren't used to losing, and certainly not like this. Not to a ghost ship, not to a race they'd declared extinct. Vekris demanded an explanation, but none came. His officers screamed over comms, but no one knew how the ship was attacking. That's when the Revenant spoke. The sound wasn't broadcast through their channels. It didn't echo in the halls. It wasn't even auditory. It was inside them, in their heads, in their bones. "You should have left us buried." One sentence. Then the ship fired. No light, no build-up, just devastation. The wall's shield grid flickered and died. Not shattered, not breached. It just stopped working. Their perfect defense, centuries of research undone in seconds. Then the weapons turned inward. Not just physical destruction, but data, memory, identity. Firewalls collapsed. Systems turned against themselves. Gun batteries spun and fired into their own command bays. Inside the Revenant, a man stood alone at the helm. Weathered. Silent. His uniform long out of date, patched with metal plates and dried blood. A single photo sat taped to his console, a woman holding a child. Earth in the background. His name had long been erased from the records, his rank forgotten, his purpose clear. He wasn't here for war, He was here for vengeance, and he wasn't going to stop. Not until the Dominion burned. The Dominion scrambled. Across the sector, command posts screamed across comms, trying to coordinate a response, but they were already too late. The Revenant wasn't a ship. It was a ghost dragging its own rules of war with it. Their fleet, built on centuries of dominance and arrogance, had no defense against what they couldn't understand. Inside the wall's control chamber, Chancellor Vecris paced like a man watching his own execution march steadily towards him. His robes, once symbols of power, now felt like a cage around his body. His top engineers tried to reroute power through backlines to relink the severed defense grid. But the virus that the Revenant carried wasn't just digital. It was surgical. Every protocol they tried to use, every line of code they wrote, turned on them. Firewalls didn't just fall, they collapsed inward, dragging entire systems with them. It wasn't long before the Dominion's third dreadnought, Hammer of Dawn, opened fire on the Revenant. Full pulse, a direct hit. It didn't matter. The beam struck the human warship broadside and dispersed, not absorbed, not reflected. Just disappeared, like it had been swallowed by something not meant to exist. For a moment, even the gunners on Hammer of Dawn paused. One of them took off his gloves and rubbed his eyes, thinking he'd imagined it. That hesitation cost them their lives. In a blink, Hammer of Dawn folded inward, no explosion, no flare, like it had collapsed into itself. A giant of war, erased from the map by a ship that made no sound. The Dominion had believed humanity died a slow, pathetic death after Earth's surface boiled under neutron fire. They never found bodies, only silence. But the Revenant was living proof that silence doesn't mean surrender. It meant planning, surviving, waiting. And now it was the Dominion's turn to be quiet. Inside the warship, the man at the helm sat still. He wasn't giving orders. He didn't need to. The ship knew. It had grown past steel and wire. It responded to his thoughts, his pain. He had wired himself into its systems years ago. Biolinks, memory cores, even fragments of other lost AIs scraped from black boxes left behind by human colonies that the Dominion had burned. The Revenant wasn't just a warship. It was a tomb, and he was its last living ghost. As his fingers hovered over controls, his thoughts wandered. Back to Mars Station Theta, where they made their final stand. Back to the screaming, the betrayal, the Dominion's promise of mercy that turned into mass sterilizations and orbital bombardments. Back to the final transmission Earth ever sent. We're still human, and we remember. He remembered his wife's last message, her breath shaky, hiding underground with their child. He never found them. All he had now was a voice recorder that hadn't worked in years and a memory that refused to die. Outside, Dominion ships regrouped, flanking the Revenant from opposite ends. An old strategy. A trap maneuver. Primitive. He didn't flinch. Instead, he activated Subsystem 9, the one they'd stolen from the ruins of an alien outpost. Even he didn't fully understand it, but he knew what it did. It made space lie. In an instant, the Revenant split into 2, then 4, then 8, each image identical, each one radiating the same deadly signal. The Dominion fired, a storm of plasma and antimatter. But none hit the real target. They'd never fought someone who wanted them to miss. In a flash, 2 Dominion cruisers collided, confused by phantom signals. A third fired into its own ally. Chaos bloomed in space, turning the most secure sector of the Jathari Dominion into a graveyard of twisted metal and oxygen fires. Back in the wall's command center, Vecris finally understood what was happening. This wasn't war. This was punishment. He turned to his aide and gave an order he never thought he'd say. Send a request for parley. Offer surrender. The aide swallowed, nodded, and opened a channel. But no answer came. Instead, every screen across the command deck flickered to life. The same image, a darkened corridor inside the Revenant, bloodstains on the floor, and in the center a child's toy, charred, melted slightly, and untouched. The message was clear: you didn't just kill soldiers, you killed memories, you killed children. The lights in the room dimmed. The hum of the power cord dipped into an uneasy silence. Then the voice returned, same as before, calm, dead, familiar. No surrender, only reckoning. The wall was dying. Bit by bit, the Jothari's symbol of eternal dominance, once called unbreakable, was being dismantled, not just physically but psychologically. The Revenant didn't have to break their weapons. It broke their faith. It poisoned their certainty. Across the Dominion's outer fleet, panic took root. Some captains disobeyed orders, retreating beyond the asteroid belt, hoping distance could save them. Others turned off their comms entirely, pretending the nightmare would pass if they just stopped looking at it. But for every ship that ran, 2 more were torn apart by weapons no Dominion design could explain. Vecris's hands trembled as he gripped the command rail. He was a man bred for politics, not battle. He'd sat on his golden seat for 37 years without a single direct threat to his rule. The last war he'd overseen had been a genocide against a farming colony that hadn't even fired back. This was something else. "What is that thing?" he muttered, more to himself than to the room. His science advisor answered without looking up. "A ghost, a revenge weapon, a message from a race we buried and forgot." "And how is it still alive? They were extinct." "They evolved, Chancellor," the man whispered, "just not in the way we expected." Inside the Revenant, the man sat alone. He had no rank anymore, no uniform, no insignia, just an old, battered chest plate with a symbol no longer recognized in this quadrant of space, a faded flag from Earth, 1 star missing, scratched off in grief. He hadn't spoken his name aloud in 20 years. There was no one left to speak it to. But he remembered the Dominion well. He remembered the day they offered peace, how they landed in Earth's orbit, spoke of treaties, trade routes, shared knowledge, and how they slaughtered every human who opened their doors. He'd watched cities turned to ash, rivers boil. He remembered the soft hum of his son's toy before the blast wave crushed his lungs in front of him. The Dominion wanted obedience. But they created something worse, a man with nothing left to lose. He brought the ship in closer to the wall's inner rings, drones scattered from its path like insects before a flame. They were designed for swarm tactics, suicide runs, explosive limbs, adaptive cloaking. He'd seen worse. He activated countermeasures buried in the ship's hull. They didn't fire. They emitted a sound. Low. Wrong. Subsonic pulses that caused every drone within 5 clicks to shudder mid-flight, drop their engines, and spiral into their own death spirals. He didn't blink. On the screen, the wall loomed closer. One of the inner spires was trying to retreat, an evacuation vessel launching from its base. A diplomatic ship, no weapons. All white hull, clean, untouched by the blood they'd ordered spilled over centuries. He didn't pause. The Revenant's forward cannon hummed, a vibration that felt like the universe itself holding its breath. He fired. The diplomatic vessel disintegrated mid-launch. No time for screams. He wasn't here to negotiate. Back on the wall, Vecris collapsed into his seat. "What does it want?" he asked, sweat pouring down his spine. A young comms officer answered, voice hollow. "I don't think it wants anything, Chancellor. It doesn't want our surrender. It doesn't want our apology. It just wants us gone." Another officer stepped forward. "Sir, we have an emergency protocol, Omega Red." Vecris turned slowly. That protocol was written for interdimensional threats. "And this qualifies," the man replied, eyes wide. "We detonate the singularity core beneath the wall, collapse the space-time field, take the warship out with us." "You mean kill ourselves?" Vecris shouted. "If we don't, Chancellor, it will do far worse." Silence gripped the room, and then, before anyone could speak again, the lights went out. Every panel, every backup, every emergency light. Darkness swallowed the command bridge whole. Then came the hum. That same vibration the Revenant always gave off before it fired, but this time it wasn't coming from outside. It was inside the wall. One of the officers screamed. Another began praying in a language long outlawed by Dominion laws. Then, in the pitch-black room, the screens flickered back on. Just one image, a family photo, a woman, a child, a man in uniform holding them both. The human at the center looked straight into the lens, and in that moment even Vecris understood. This wasn't a warship. It was a grave carrying a vengeance the Dominion had no language for. There was no sound. Not really. Just that low, pulsing hum, like the ship was breathing, like it had lungs carved out of vengeance and bone. On the wall, panic turned to paralysis. The silence made it worse. Officers froze in place, staring at screens that no longer responded. A few reached for emergency oxygen masks out of instinct, as if choking fear could be cured with air. Vecris sat in his chair, mouth open, breathing hard, sweat dripping off his chin. His legacy, the wall, the Dominion, the centuries of dominance, was unraveling in front of him. Then the lights came back, slowly. Not all at once. One strip, then another. But the glow was off, flickering, pale yellow instead of the Dominion's proud blue. Then the alarms began to wail. But not in Dominion code. They screamed in Earth Standard. "Critical breach detected. Evacuate all levels. Core failure imminent." The voice was mechanical. Female, gentle, old, an Earth AI, one of the old models. The kind used on transport ships and civilian hubs. The kind that should have been extinct. That voice didn't belong in the wall, unless someone put it there. And then they understood. The Revenant was inside their systems now. Not hacking. Not overriding. Living there, the ship was carving pieces of itself into their tech, like a virus latching onto a dying host, and there was nothing they could do to stop it. Inside the Revenant, he stood in silence, watching the wall fall apart piece by piece. He had waited a long time for this moment. 23 years, 6 months, and 14 days. That's how long it had been since Earth's last breath was broadcast into deep space. He still remembered the exact time stamp. He had tattooed it onto the inside of his forearm, in his own blood, the day the last safe house on Luna went dark. They thought he died with the others. They even listed him among the casualties. He survived. Barely. And while he floated through dead space in an escape pod stitched together with wires and rage, he made a decision. If the universe had let him live, it was for one reason only. To make them remember what they erased. He didn't just rebuild a ship, he rebuilt memory. The Revenant wasn't armed with traditional weapons. It used them against themselves, turned their machines into bombs, their firewalls into knives. He didn't need to outgun them. He just had to outlive them long enough to bring the old pain forward. And now they were drowning in it. On the wall, Vecris gave up the illusion of leadership. He stumbled down to the emergency lifts with his security team. They were supposed to lead him to the central vault, the only part of the wall that could seal off from external systems. But by the time the lift reached the lower decks, it was already too late. The doors opened into a hallway filled with smoke. And a voice, echoing through the corridor. A human voice. Male. Calm. Broken. "You killed our sky, you burned our soil, you said we were weak." Now you'll see what the weak become when you take everything away." The soldiers around Vecris raised their weapons, spinning wildly, but there was no one there, just the voice. And then, in the smoke ahead, a silhouette appeared. Tall, covered in scorched armor, a helmet shaped not like the sleek Jothari models, but like something ancient, primitive. Its chest plate was dented, marked. One side of it still had the outline of a child's handprint burned into the steel. Vecris's mouth opened, but he didn't speak. The figure walked slowly, deliberately. The guards fired. The bullets passed through the smoke and hit the walls behind it. Hologram. Just a projection. But it didn't stop moving. "This isn't your fortress anymore. This is my grave, and you're the ones buried in it now." Then the corridor exploded. A pressure wave tore through the bottom deck, crumpling support beams like paper. Vecris was thrown backward, skull cracking against a wall. His vision blurred, red at the edges. As he slipped into unconsciousness, the last thing he saw was the human figure walking toward him. Slow, certain, and impossibly real. And in the man's hand wasn't a gun. It was a photo, burnt around the edges, held like a weapon. He woke to pain. His skull felt split in two, blood crusted into his hairline, vision doubled. The air was thick with smoke, the taste of copper and melted plastic on his tongue. Emergency lights pulsed dim red, barely functioning, like the wall itself was gasping through its last breaths. Vecris pushed himself up with one arm, the other useless and numb. His guards were dead, blown apart by the blast that ripped through the corridor. One of them lay twisted over a support beam, eyes wide open, mouth frozen mid-scream. Another was missing half a torso. He was alone now. And somewhere deep inside the wall he was still coming. The human. Not a soldier, not a politician, not even a name in their archives anymore, just a ghost wearing vengeance like a uniform. Vecris stumbled forward, dragging his feet down the corridor, pressing his hand against the wall for balance. Every screen he passed showed the same image, a flickering photo of a woman and child, burned around the corners. The message wasn't subtle. This wasn't about war. This was personal. In the upper deck of the Revenant, the man watched from the bridge. He didn't blink, didn't breathe heavy. His eyes were hollow, focused but empty in a way that spoke of someone who had died long ago, even if his body had kept moving. The wall was collapsing in on itself. Subsystems failing, power cores destabilizing, internal comms hijacked. They were trying to evacuate what few ships still worked. A fleet of medical and diplomatic vessels had launched 20 minutes ago, running blind through the sector's asteroid field in hopes the Revenant wouldn't follow. He didn't follow. He didn't care. They weren't the ones who gave the order. But the Chancellor, he was still inside. That mattered. The man reached for the console, fingers tracing a cracked screen. Static rolled through it, flickers of old memories embedded in the ship's worn data core. Earth's skyline, his wife's face, his son's laugh, looped on a 5-second recording he could no longer play without the system crashing. It didn't matter. This wasn't about what he lost anymore. It was about what they thought they could take without consequence. And now, they were learning the price. Vecris reached the vault at the heart of the wall, a reinforced chamber meant to survive planetary bombardment. He slammed his ID chip into the reader, fingers shaking. It denied him. A second attempt. Access denied, voice mismatch, identification incomplete. He stared at the panel, heart hammering. The explosion had damaged his vocal cords. His voice wasn't registering. He screamed, no words, just rage, spit and blood flying against the reader. Still nothing. Behind him, the corridor lights dimmed. The hum returned. That sound, low, vibrating through the air, through the walls, into his bones. He turned slowly, mouth dry. Smoke began to pour through the ceiling vents. Not fire, not gas, just smoke. Then the hologram returned. Same figure, same stance, closer now. No speech this time, just a stare. The helmet shifted, something almost human behind the visor, not entirely visible. But Vecris felt it, saw the hate etched into every movement. Then the image changed. He blinked, confused, as the figure dissolved, and was replaced by surveillance footage. Grainy, unstable, pulled from old Dominion archives, never meant to see light again. A family, standing outside a battered building, laughing. The man from The Revenant, 20 years younger, holding a boy, kissing a woman on the cheek. A life frozen in one last second of peace. Then the footage jumped. Explosions, fire, screaming. And a voice, Vecris's voice, giving the approval order for orbital sterilization. Eliminate the sector. No survivors, no seeds of rebellion, no memory left behind. The footage cut. Silence again. Vecris dropped to his knees. He remembered that day. Billions of names on his desk. He never looked at a single one. It was just protocol, just cleansing. They weren't people to him. Now he was one of them, crawling, helpless, staring at the face of death. The hologram stepped forward, closer. Vecris whispered, "I didn't know. I didn't know it would. I didn't know it was you." The voice responded. Real this time, not synthetic, coming through the speakers with broken clarity. "You didn't care." Then the wall beside him detonated. Light filled the chamber, and through the smoke walked the real thing, not a projection, not a threat, just a man, standing face to face with the ghost of his past. Vecris tried to speak, but nothing came. The human stood over him in silence, breathing slow, face unreadable beneath the scratched visor. In one hand, he held a weapon, in the other, the photo. Then, without a word, he turned and dropped the photo at Vecris's feet, and walked away. He didn't need to kill him. He'd already buried him, under the weight of his own legacy. The Revenant didn't leave. It hovered silently above the ruins of the wall, its engines cold, its weapons dormant, watching, waiting. Across the Dominion, word spread faster than official channels could contain. Pirate bands, outer rim smugglers, fringe colonies, all picking up scrambled broadcasts, intercepted death calls, and half-melted telemetry that painted one truth. A human warship destroyed the wall. Alone. The first reactions were disbelief. Myths. Some thought it was an internal collapse. Others said the wall had been sabotaged, a failed experiment, propaganda. But those who heard the voice, those who saw the symbol on the Revenant's hull, who caught even one glimpse of that blood-stained armor, knew better. Earth had sent something back, and it wasn't a message. It was a judgment. Inside the Revenant, he didn't celebrate. There was no victory, just silence. The ship's interior was dim, lit only by backup lighting and flickering data cores. The AI interface, once bright and responsive, now ran only in diagnostic mode. The systems were tired. The ship itself groaned, wounded, overclocked, bleeding coolant from cracks never meant to be patched with scrap. He sat in the command chair, slouched, one hand resting on the sidearm he hadn't used. He could have killed Vecris. He'd wanted to. He'd planned for it, played it in his head 1,000 times. But when the moment came, when the man finally looked up at him, broken, old and afraid, it didn't feel like justice. It felt hollow, because his wife was still ash, his son was still gone. No death, not even Vecris's, could bring that back. And that's what vengeance really was. A slow realization that once you get it, there's nothing left to hold on to. He leaned back, eyes drifting to the holoframe mounted above the console. The same photo. The last thing he'd pulled from the wreckage of their home. He used to play the voice recordings on loop, His boy's laugh, high and sharp. His wife's voice reading bedtime stories. The audio had degraded over the years. Now it was just static. But he played it anyway. Over and over, static and all. In the Dominion core worlds, panic turned to outrage. Vecris returned in silence, his ship limping into orbit above Jothar Prime. Half his government expected him to arrive in a casket. The other half hoped he would. He walked into the Dominion High Council chamber without ceremony. No entourage, no guards, and no excuses. He looked 10 years older, hair matted, skin pale, one arm still wrapped in a bloodied sling. The chamber quieted as he stood at the center and said only one thing. We failed. Humanity didn't die. We buried them and left their ghosts to rot. Now they've come back, and we have nothing that can stop them. A silence followed. One of the war ministers leaned forward. So what's your proposal? Appeasement? Apology? Vecris laughed, bitter and hollow. He doesn't want words. Another voice. Then what does he want? Vecris didn't blink. To remind us we're not untouchable, that for all our weapons and walls and laws, we can still be made to bleed, that our sins have a longer memory than we do. Someone scoffed. You let him live? Vecris turned slowly, his face unreadable. I didn't let him do anything. He let me live. That's the difference. In a dark sector beyond Dominion territory, a relay station powered back on, one of the old human satellites, long thought to be space junk. It flickered, sputtered, then began transmitting a signal. Short, repeating, a list of names, no message, no demand, just names. Billions of them. The dead of Earth. And at the bottom, newly added, Vecris, Chancellor accounted, spared. The Dominion couldn't decode the rest of the data, but it didn't matter, because now they understood what the Revenant really was. Not a ship, not a soldier, not even revenge. It was a roll call, a reckoning written name by name. And the list wasn't finished. The fracture began quietly. No declarations, no rebellions, just silence across border systems, supply chains, fringe colonies. Silence where once there were reports, taxes, commands obeyed without question. Governors stopped sending transmissions, patrols vanished, civilian ships changed their transponder IDs and dropped off Dominion tracking systems like ghosts in the black. Fear had taken root deeper than Vecris anticipated. The wall was more than a military stronghold. It had been a symbol, a promise that nothing could touch the core, that the Dominion could not be challenged. Now it was gone, and the Dominion looked mortal for the first time in generations. Vecris knew the storm was coming. He could see it in the eyes of his council. Men and women who used to kiss his rings now whispered in back halls, their voices filled with calculation and quiet panic. If they turned against him, there'd be no warning. No honor among the elite. Just a knife in the back and another name on the marble wall of high command. So he did the unthinkable. He ordered a search. Not for resistance cells, not for traitors, for the human. He called in every favor, every black site operative, every deep space scavenger and information dealer he could bribe or blackmail. The order was simple. Find the Revenant. Find the man. Do not engage. Do not fire. Just find him. When asked why, he gave no answer, but deep inside he knew. He had seen the future of the Dominion already, and it was wearing a helmet with a child's burnt handprint on the chest plate. The Revenant drifted through the dark between systems, silent, invisible, wounded but still alive. Inside he was repairing systems by hand. The ship was more than half machine now, stitched together from a dozen battles, scavenged cores, forgotten tech that even the Dominion had dismissed as obsolete. He'd given up his blood, his nerves, his sanity to keep it flying. But it was breaking down. So was he. The systems were old, brittle. The AI barely responded now. One of its data cores had fried during the last assault on the wall's inner deck. That meant voice playback from Earth's last broadcast was corrupted permanently. He hadn't heard his son's laugh in 7 days. He didn't know why that hurt more than anything else. As he floated in silence, patching a coolant line by hand, a red light blinked on the console. Someone had pinged the ship. Not locked on, just pinged. A ripple in space. He stared at the signal for a long time. It wasn't Jothari. The encryption was too crude, too desperate. He cracked it in seconds. The message wasn't from a military channel, not a bounty hunter, not a trap. It was from a colony. Human. One of the scattered seeds that had fled before Earth fell, long thought lost or dead. The message was simple. A voice. If you're out there, we remember. We survived. We're still human. He leaned back slowly, eyes burning. For a long moment, he didn't move. Then he tapped a button. Just one. Send coordinates. I'm coming. Back in Dominion space, rumors spread faster than truth. A lone freighter swore it passed the Revenant near the Kellis Drift. A mining crew claimed to have picked up the warship's echo near an old Earth ruin. Traders told stories of seeing a shadow in the stars, never attacking, just watching. And one by one, outer colonies began pulling away from Dominion control. Quiet withdrawals, planetary governors disappearing in the night, military outposts abandoned without orders, entire systems going dark. The Dominion tried to crush it. But you can't kill whispers. You can't arrest a ghost. Vekris saw what was happening and made one last move. He summoned the archives, the hidden vault of Dominion war history, classified atrocities, cover-ups, and forbidden projects. There, buried deep, was a file from 23 years ago. Project Ashglass, the extermination of Earth. Inside were surveillance logs never released to the public. Video records of the bombardment, AI transcripts of civilian pleas, audio logs of emergency beacons ignored. And at the bottom, a flagged warning. Subject: Revenant-class escape pod detected, J9 orbit, status unknown. Bio readings, 1 adult male, severe trauma, vitals unstable. Recovery, not initiated. He read it twice, then once more. Then he closed the file and said quietly to himself, "We made him." He wasn't angry anymore. He was afraid. Because ghosts don't need an army. They just need a reason. The colony was buried in dust. He arrived in silence, the Revenant emerging from the void like a shadow, remembering how to breathe. No weapons armed, no shields raised, just presence, raw and heavy. Below him, the surface of the forgotten human outpost cracked under solar storms. No defenses, no lights, no obvious structures, just sand. Silence. But the signal had come from here. He scanned the terrain twice, then again. Nothing moved. Still he landed. The Revenant groaned as it touched down, its landing struts half rusted, patched with composite scraps and melted Dominion alloy. Inside, he disconnected the neural interface and stood on weak legs. His body had forgotten gravity, his mind hadn't. Every step out of that ship felt heavier than war. He walked alone toward the signal source, a weak transmitter buried beneath a rock outcropping, blinking slow green. When he reached it, it triggered a sequence. A small entrance opened in the ground. Dust poured into the recess as lights flickered to life. Dim, solar-fed, barely working. But enough. He climbed down, and for the first time in 2 decades he heard it. Human voices, laughter, conversation, the low hum of machines built by desperate hands and stubborn hearts. They were alive. At the bottom of the tunnel, behind a sealed pressure door, stood 3 people, older than him. Worn, ragged, carrying weapons crafted from salvaged tech. They stared at him as the door opened, unmoving. Then one stepped forward. A woman, lines on her face, grey in her hair, but her eyes were human. "You're the one from the signal," she said, not a question. He nodded once. She looked him over. The blood-streaked armour, the burns, the cracked visor with a child's handprint still visible under the dust. "You came here alone?" He paused, then answered, "I was already alone." She held his stare, then nodded toward the corridor behind her. "Come in, you're not anymore." The colony was small, underground, scraped together from what little they'd salvaged when Earth burned. Fewer than 200 survivors. Most were children when the fires fell. Some weren't born yet. But they remembered. They remembered the names, the skies turning red, the sound of Earth's last signal, cut mid-sentence. They had clung to what remained. Old maps, broken data drives, fragments of human culture not yet erased by the Dominion. And now their ghost had returned. He walked among them like a shadow at first, silent, distant. But every day he came a little closer. He helped repair their generators, taught their defense teams how to spot a Dominion relay drone before it blinked, read stories to children who had never known what a parent's voice was supposed to sound like. And when they asked why he came, why now, after all this time, he would only say one thing: "Because you're still here." Far across the stars, the Dominion rotted from the inside. Systems broke off one by one. Vecrus resigned without ceremony. He was replaced by a council of military warlords who couldn't even agree on which borders to defend. They were no longer feared. They were remembered only as tyrants who failed to kill a ghost. They launched one final search fleet to find the Revenant. It never came back. Some said it was ambushed. Others claimed it defected. A few believed it never left their orbit at all, choosing instead to vanish and leave the new generation to rebuild without Dominion fear. In the colony, the Revenant was buried, piece by piece. He dismantled it himself, melting down the weapons, salvaging the AI cores, donating the medical systems to the colony's clinic. He kept only the bridge, rebuilt into a shrine of memory. On one wall, he mounted the photograph. Still burnt. Still there. Beneath it, he added a plaque. Not names, not vengeance, just words. "We are not gone. We are not quiet. We are not done." The children would touch it as they passed, running fingers over the metal. And sometimes, when the solar wind howled across the surface, the wind carried a low hum. Not fear, not pain, but remembrance. And for the first time in his life, he let go of the war inside him and rested.